Hello, good evening, and welcome to Sunday Night Live. This week, I am joined by Marie van der Zyl, President of the Board of Deputies. Good evening, Marie. How are you?
Good evening. I'm great. I love the music. Very good.
It instantly puts you into a good mood. And
very calm.
It's designed to lull you into a false sense of security. You think I'm not going to ask you any hard questions.
Thing behind it. Well, I've had a very easy day today, so I'm ready for questions.
So we know you've had a long day today, I think we could say, and with some complexities which we might cover in brief detail, if you don't mind. But to start off with and to sort of introduce, we've got a very varied audience. Some of it comes from our own synagogue, but really representative of organisations across all of North Manchester, Manchester as a whole. Tell us, for those that don't know what the Board of Deputies does, could you sum it up for us?
We are the democratic representative UK body that represents the Jewish community to the government, the media, and anybody else that wants to understand what is the Jewish community's responses to various issues. So you will have, I'm sure, read lots during the terrible times with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party in particular. We had to respond to many of those issues time and time again. We are also very active in relation to Israel. Israel is in our constitution to promote the welfare, standing and security of Israel. We're very involved in international affairs. I've been elected as the chair of the Council of the European Jewish Congress a few months ago. And I'm also vice president of the World Jewish Congress. And we know that anti-Semitism is a global disease. So we need global solutions, and we work together in relation to those. And also we take a big role in defending our religious freedoms. I could talk for a lot more. We've done a lot of broadcasting during coronavirus to try and keep the community together. And the regions is a key part of our strategy, because we want to make sure that we are not a London-centric organisation.
Okay, so I mean, maybe we'll start with that point, because the Board of Deputies, and I suppose that they're not alone. There are other organisations we could think of, perhaps even the JLC. Sometimes have in the past been accused of being ever so slightly London centric, and that what goes on in the grim north is not necessarily their priority. But you're saying that you're trying to change that.
Well, in my election manifesto, that was a key pledge, that we wouldn't be London centric. And my very first day when I was elected was actually in Manchester. I studied in Liverpool, so I've got very fond memories from the Northwest. At the moment, I'm sure you've all read the newspaper article that's come out in the Jewish Chronicle about our reforms that we need for our organisation. And one of them is to make sure that deputies can be reassured from the regions that there is a regional trustee at the Board of Deputies table, because at the moment there isn't a designated trustee slot, and that's one of the things that that we feel is vitally important, so that the regions are represented, as well as a space for a youth trustee, which you're probably going to ask me about in due course. So I think it's that important. We need to make sure that there is a regional trustee so that we are fully representative. But during the coronavirus, can I say, everyone has come together. I meet monthly with all the presidents of all the rep councils, and the volunteering has been absolutely fantastic. The coming together up and down the country has been incredible, but it's my job to make sure going forwards that the board is representative and fully has representation from the regions at that top table.
So we spoke briefly off air, but I mean, I suppose that Jewish Chronicle article today says it all in terms of the language that it uses. It was an extremely close vote, nothing as close as a Brexit vote, but it was clear that the majority had spoken, 61% in favour, I think, and the 39% left over. So, I mean, that's not enough to trigger the changes, as I understand it. You need a 2/3, 1/3 majority, don't you?
Well, that's correct. When the old constitution was written, that is the position. But there's other more fundamental reasons why we need the changes. We've got a very old-fashioned structure, which is called an unincorporated association. And that means myself, the current executive, and all of the deputies are potentially liable if we are sued. And I'm sure you'll appreciate that that's not an acceptable structure in this day and age. So we have to make sure that we have the appropriate governance in place, and this is why we want to incorporate, so that individual deputies don't face the prospect of financial liability, and also to make sure that we have modern, up-to-date governance and that we are a fully representative body.
Okay, so just to look at that again, I mean, the Chronicle labels, I think, the four main protagonists that have been driving some of the reforms, or have been instrumental, I suppose, in fighting certain points. They've been labelled as the Gang of Four.
I think they labelled themselves as the Gang of Four.
I'm not sure if that's helpful or unhelpful, but I'm speaking to members of our community. I mean, they'll know who our deputy is, and Robert is able to vociferously sort of voice his opinion. It's something that he does
very well. Absolutely.
He does very for his own profession. I think he does it very well, but I think he also does it on behalf of our communities, and I suppose that the change that they're after is, I mean, that they are looking for a structure that they feel better serves the regions, but you want to see firm action taking place whereby there is at least one executive member that has responsibility for the regions.
What's proposed is that there are 6 additional trustees. Everyone will be pleased to know that that's all agreed. What the difference is that we at the top table, the trustees propose And bear in mind, some of it we have to do is to comply with our fiduciary duties as trustees, a governance and risk trustee, which is really needed. Then we want to make sure that there, as I've said, there is a regional trustee, because if there isn't a designated regional trustee, election doesn't always give you what you want. There may not be anyone from the regions, and it's very important, I think, that the regional trustee is also the regional chair, who is also elected at the board, and that they come to put at the top table what the regions need to be supported, and to make sure that they have an absolute say in the running of the Board of Deputies. And election doesn't always bring what you need. For example, I've had to deal with a lot of the governance and risk issues myself, as I'm a solicitor, and really I'm the president. I also have to work. It's not ideal, and I believe the regions are so important that they should have a permanent trustee in the organisation, so that they would be guaranteed to have one trustee out of 11. I think that that's very important, so that we're not London centric. I'm fulfilling my election mandate to make sure that the regions are properly represented.
And no, we don't want to over labour this point. I promise you that we'll move on to something a little easier in a second, but it would be remiss of us not to address it. The claims within the JC article, and I suppose they do quote the so-called Gang of Four, as it were, that the proposals would mean that you're effectively transferring unreasonable power to trustees. What would you answer that?
Well, I don't really know what they're suggesting. At the moment, the organisation is run by 5 trustees, and I don't think that's enough for an organisation like ours. It was also in my manifesto pledge to increase the number of trustees. I don't really understand what they're saying, because there's so much work to be done. I really welcome the additional trustees, but it's no purpose having 6 additional trustees that don't know what they're doing or don't have any roles. And just to say, the negotiations for the governance changes started in 2012. Now, you mentioned Brexit, and I would say in response that this is taking longer than Brexit to be resolved. But we need to ensure, and the regional chair is very much on side with having a regional trustee, and so are the regional deputies. They do want to have a regional trustee, and indeed a youth trustee, because they are an underrepresented group. I'm sure you'll ask me about young people.
Well, yeah, well, I'm going to get into that in a second, but just to briefly touch on that, 61% is a great result all over, because it sort of says that consensus is there for change, and that hopefully it gives you a roadmap of various outstanding points that could perhaps be negotiated with the belligerents, as it were, to try and get everybody on team. Surely you're not another 12 years away from this change?
No. I've already been in discussions with the regional chair this afternoon. They want to make sure that their regional chair is based in the regions. I can just see there's a question come up.
Yeah,
are you saying one trustee will represent 50% of the UK Jewish community? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that going forwards, the proposals are for the Board of Deputies to have 11 trustees, and I want to make sure, in case election doesn't produce regional trustees, that there is a guaranteed place at the trustee table for the regions, who will be responsible for our regional strategy and interaction with the regions. I'm of course hopeful there'll be more trustees that do come from the regions, but we don't want to be London centric. So it's a sign of wanting to make sure we engage fully with the regions, that we want to make sure from the trustees that there is a guaranteed place at the table.
Okay.
It's for trustees just to have no roles and for them to be fluid. But I say that we need to have certain roles, for example, governance and risk trustee and a young trustee. There would be 2 roles that do not have portfolios, but we need to make sure that people have got roles that are needed. The comment 10 to 1, well, yes, election may well produce more than one trustee, that comes from the regions. That is understood, but there needs to be one trustee with responsibility for the regional strategy. So that is what I'm saying is important. It's not denigrating the regions, but at the moment, the proposals are that there isn't a regional, by the Gang of Four, that there is not a regional trustee. So I'm trying to make sure that there is a regional trustee.
Okay, so I happened to speak to one of the Gang of Four today briefly, because obviously I had to do my homework for tonight. But moving on from this in just a second. But I think one of the things that they also wanted to ensure was that there wasn't sort of like an oversight committee in terms of who actually is eligible for trustee in terms of selection processes, and that it be dealt with sort of democratically. Is that something you're in favour of?
That, I'm afraid, went a long time ago. The nominations committee, which would have, for example, in relation to the regions, very light touch, made sure that the regional deputy came from the regions, didn't live in London, for example. That went a long time ago. The nominations committee would have checked, for example, if somebody's standing for the governance and this trustee, that they would have had the skills. But fine, that was the Gang of Four, as you've called them. They didn't want to have a nominations committee, and that was accepted. So that's not there. So that's actually not something that's been relevant for some time.
Okay. So hopefully we've got a short way to go then in gaining overall consensus.
Well, this is a matter of compromise. I've always said, because we've had various meetings going on now for a year and a half. We've had a constitution working group, and Robert was involved in the constitution working group, and I want to thank him for everything that he's done in there. And they've been talking about this for a year and a half. We've had various meetings and meetings. So we're now very, very close. So what we need to do, it's a bit like an act of parliament going backwards and forwards, is we need to see from today, we're very close, that we get some compromise, and people need to act in the best interest of the community. I urge people not to look at their personal feelings or agendas, and to look at having a board of deputies that is really structured for the future, for the benefit of the whole community. And I think we're nearly there, and there's some compromise. I've already had quite a few calls and emails this afternoon, so I am confident that with goodwill on all sides and coming together now, we'll get there for the benefit of the community and the regions.
Fantastic. Right, we're going to change down a gear now. You'll probably be glad to know. Rodney Barclay, good evening, Rodney. Thanks for joining us. Rodney's commented, having witnessed the success of Limud on Zoom, in which you participated, would you consider having the board's meeting on Zoom even after COVID? So for context, I think there's been an awful lot that the board has done on Zoom. I managed to tune in to a live broadcast of your meeting this morning. Fascinating, just the way that it was handled. I've never sat in on one of those things before.
So, I have to say.
I think I tuned in after the election, if you like, but after the vote. But, you know, on that point, there are some efficiencies that we've all got due to Zoom. I mean, it's easier for you to visit the north tonight virtually than it would be sort of leaving London and coming down here. So will that be a regular feature going forward?
I think from this pandemic, there is no good, but you have to take the very best of what we've seen. And it enables people that wouldn't otherwise be able to join, or in remote communities, to be part of the Board of Deputies. Human contact, there isn't a substitute for that. So going forwards, we're likely to have face-to-face meetings. We may have some entirely that are Zoom during the year, but what I would like to achieve in the future is to have face-to-face meetings, and also have screens there where people can come in and join us also on Zoom, so that we get used to working with people actually in the room. And for those that can't come and travel, they can also join, and that we go forwards on that basis. But I do want to get the human contact as well, and make sure that I do come in person to Shawl and to the communities, because that, to be honest, has been the very best part of the job. And there isn't a substitute for that. But yes, we will be having Zoom in the future, and we've done a lot broadcasting. We had, for example, our event with the Israeli ambassador at Hanukkah and the ambassadors for the UAE and Bahrain. We had 15,000 people watching. So we've had huge numbers. So we know that we can reach people. So we will carry on.
And in terms of sort of televising or live broadcasts of your meetings, to what extent is the board precious about confidentiality? When do you broadcast? When do you not broadcast? What do you consider to be off limits to the public, and what do you consider to be firmly in the public interest?
The earlier discussions about our structure and being an unincorporated association were, I think, private between the deputies. But the problem is certain people do go to the press, and it's very good for everything else. We're very open. I don't think any other organisation puts up its meetings live. You've watched it. Anybody can watch it. We're open and transparent. But the changes to our constitution and telling people that we're an unincorporated organisation, I don't think is a good thing. We need to be conscious of those sorts of things, and to be able to have confidential discussions on occasions, particularly about our structure. And also, it's fair that people aren't named or shamed because they've got a personal view which they've given. People are entitled to give their views themselves without people thinking they've done something wrong. So that's the only time that we haven't been broadcast. We've had the vote today, which was a private vote, but everything else, all our motions, everything is on screen. We don't have any real privacy at the board. It's all there. Everybody's involved. Well, everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's a private here.
I got to witness that today firsthand. So, obviously, hats off to you. It was a very tightly chaired meeting, and it must be frustrating for some of the deputies because they've only got sort of a very limited time to give their point of view across. And I suppose you as chair have to move on extremely quickly to the next comment. And it's hard to give them all sort of preference and time.
They've got 2.5 minutes, but today we had 260 people registered for the meeting. So it is. And when people spoke for longer, people would just speak aimlessly. And now I'm finding, particularly on Zoom, the contributions actually are much better. People have planned what they're going to say. They've got focus and meaning. And I think it's improved the tone of the debate, although I do have concerns about how people are not always respected, and people have to give their views with tolerance and respect. Which you may have seen this morning as well.
I caught that particular episode as well, where you had to call somebody to order.
We won't say their name, but yes, I mean that does happen. Unfortunately, it does. But also, when deputies, for example, give their views about Israel, that's the particular time where people have got very, very intense feelings, and we have to learn to give our views with tolerance and to make sure that there is respect, and that is the dialogue, and the way we conduct our dialogue, I think, is very important.
So it was almost like a far less comical version of Countdown or Just a Minute, where the countdown timer was there towards the end. But let's tackle that. I mean, you famously have always said that, one Jew, 3 prime ministers, in as much as everybody's got an opinion and everybody presumes that they know better than everyone else. And that, generally speaking, is true. But in the Board of Deputies claims to be representative or has to try to be representatives of the whole gamut of British Jewry, and in all its different colours and in all its different permutations
and beauty of all the denominations. Yes,
correct. And that must be a very difficult task to do, not just because of the differing opinions, because consensus is something that is unlikely to be achieved on fundamental issues as strong as Israel. And you could see that this morning, that when it comes to Israel, that's certainly one of the pain points. You have perhaps more progressive or liberal congregations that may be more left-leaning in their political views. You've obviously got some of the more right-leaning congregations as well. It must be a nightmare to get consensus.
It's very difficult. I mean, I'm a firm Zionist. My grandparents made Aliyah in 1969. I've been going to Israel all my life, and it is very difficult. But we are a community, and we are a community of diverse views, and we have to try to reach that consensus. And unfortunately, our chief executive, although I'm very proud of her, she's been elevated to be a peer, as you know. When she leaves, we're going to have an interim CEO who is Michael Uyghur, who was the chair of the UJIA. So I'm hoping actually that he will bring some very good aspects of Israel education, and he will help with the way that the deputies can discuss Israel and support Israel in a meaningful way. And we've also got very, very esteemed deputies like Joy Wolf has now joined the board of deputies. There to help. We've got UK LFI. There's Robert. We need to find a way to engage with Jews with other views. But I'm very, very firm Zionist. I've never hidden that. But I don't think we can necessarily say there's a profile on this. There is some say that there is. But we can try to reach that consensus. It was very difficult in the summer when a motion was put, and in the end we had 3 different motions. This was to do with the proposed annexation, and that did feel very, very divisive. But we have got through that, and I think Michael Uyghur will be a very good interim CEO that can help us as a community improve the debate on Israel.
So what does the board tend to do from a PR perspective? You are there voicing the opinion, if you like, that is representative of the British Jewish community's opinion, and it's very varied. But on things like annexation, where do you end up? Do you end up sort of saying, look, there are differences of opinion and we can't be seen to be speaking one way or the other?
I did that in the end, because there was lobbying from the left, lobbying from the right. We also had lobbying outside our offices when we had access to our offices and things like that.
Right.
Yes, I did end up saying that it was very, very divided. It was very divided. Opinion was divided. And I also said, of course, we don't live in Israel. The Israeli electorate have also got to decide for themselves what their priorities are. I understand that. So there are divisions, and that was accepted. We had in the end the debate, but there were 3 different motions, which reflects the different views in the community. So the Board of Deputies policy, which was to support a 2-state solution, which is in our manifesto, which your listeners can see online. In the end, that was supported, and we've moved on. But as you say, that is a very, very important part of our work, and we've been running some very good events with the embassy during lockdown. We've regularly now, even normal events with the embassy, getting 400, 500, 600 people watching. So I think we certainly will be carrying on with this sort of broadcasting. And we also like StreamYard that you're using as well today. That's a particularly good
Yeah, we like it because it allows people to sort of interact and ask questions as they go along. One such question is right there. Deborah Fraser. How good evening.
Okay, the regions include Wales, and the regions also include Northern Ireland. So we've got right from Aberdeen to Northern Ireland. It's the whole country. The regions are anything outside of London. So that's why it's important. I can't give you the exact number of the regions, but there's an awful lot of them. But it's the full UK. There isn't any corner that there isn't where there are Jews representatives now. Even as I say, we've got Aberdeen.
Okay, fantastic. Right, I've got another comment that's come in. It's a little bit lengthy, but we'll try and get through it if you don't mind. I've only got part of it. It's obscuring the screen. It's so big. I fully understand the history of why the right wing left the board. However, currently the board cannot legitimately claim that they represent all of Anglo Jewry, since the fastest growing section of the community are unrepresented. I think that by changing the board to mirror the parliamentary system of one deputy per area, obviously smaller landmass and heavily represented areas, this would solve the denomination issue. It would also solve the question the board had a few years ago regarding, and unfortunately I don't have the rest of that comment to hand.
I would say that in relation to the Haredi community, we work very well with the Haredi community, and for me this also stems from when I was the vice president responsible for burial, because we had to do a campaign against the inner London North coroner, Mary Hassel. So they aren't part of the board of deputies, but we actually do a lot of work together, and we help. So we are there for all Jews, and I think that we need to remember that. Certain communities, for example, Manchester, will have a lot more people. So one person per area wouldn't really work, in my view, because Manchester is a very, very big place. You would expect to have lots of representatives from Manchester. A small community will have a representative, but that's part of the change that we've got in our new proposals. But you can't, in my view, have one vote per area. But we do have a lot of people on the board of deputies that I would say have right-wing views. In that fact, they're very strong. And I think one of the issues that we've got at the board is there's a lot of left-leaning people and right-leaning people, and the middle is actually something that is not as strong as it was, and it's my job to try to keep the middle ground. So I definitely think there are people with right-wing, what you would call right-wing views in the board of deputies, and they haven't left. In fact, they're very vocal.
Okay.
Lobbied from both sides. Always get petitions from both sides.
Yeah, and it was very clear. You could hear both of those voices this morning, particularly when we touched on, I think it was vaccination in Israel and the response. The response to that political conundrum over there. But without going into too much detail on that, we've touched very briefly on the Haredi community, and as Modi and Esther quite clearly have pointed out, that is the fastest growing element of all of our communities, who, let's face it, sometimes hold very different views to your colleagues on the left or the more progressive congregations. Do you honestly envisage a time where we're going to see more Haredim represented on the board? You've got, is it one at the moment?
Yes, we do. Shmuel Yosef. Yes, we do. No, I don't think the Haredim are going to come back to be members of the board directly. Eli Spitzer from that community, there is an article in the Jewish Chronicle, he suggested in effect doing a deal with the Board of Deputies to be representative. But the Haredi community also is comprised of all different types of communities.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just one community. But I have to say that the relationship between the mainstream community and the Haredim is greatly improved. And during lockdown, we've all had to work together. We've all had to speak to the government. We've all had to address concerns. And I think that is a very, very good thing. We also have a large number of federation shuls within the Board of Deputies as well. And we're in a good place in terms of denomination. We are representing from Liberal, Reform, United Synagogue, Independent Orthodox, and we are working with the Haredi community. We will make sure we were there. You might have seen me criticised this morning because I wrote a letter for the Haredi community to the London Borough of Hackney about a local issue that they had. So everybody at the Board of Deputies also needs to understand. Nobody is going to, I think, rejoin if there are women and the reform representatives are there, and you can't ask women and reform deputies now to be leaving, but we don't need to be formally rejoined.
Yeah,
we are working together happily.
I don't think that you're ever going to get those people to achieve consensus on key points. And I think actually that with the stand that the board has sometimes taken on the personal views of certain deputies outside of the board, it could be fair to say that it can be, where they have such a broad range of opinion, it may be a full-time job just keeping tabs of who said what and why.
Well, yes, and also the priorities of the Haredi community may not be, for example, Israel, which is a huge priority of the mainstream Jewish community, how we advocate for Israel. I've got different issues. The Haredi community is very, very concerned principally about education, those sorts of issues.
Okay, so I'd like to neatly segue into another section of the community, if you like, that is we've all had difficulty engaging, and that's our youth. And one of the questions we've got here from Adam Kaler, it's not clear whether Adam's asking this in his capacity as a member of our shul or as a member of the press, but I'm going to address him as a member of our shul.
I saw his article that was in the Jewish Telegraph. We did have, I can see he's put a question, is a question there, under the age of 35. I will say at the moment, one of the proposals today to come to the table was for there, as well as being a regional trustee, was for there to be a youth trustee. And 37 young people signed this letter in agreement that they would like to have a youth trustee. So I think that's a very, very good sign of the strength. We've got nearly 300 deputies, so we do have a lot of people in their 40s. I'll share with your viewers that I'm 55 and I became board president at 52. So you can see I'm not an elderly. It's true, but I'm not an elderly deputy. But I am wanting to make sure that the youth are represented, and I was very proud of the youth side of the board during the summer. We've had a fantastic youth plenary, which was something that created a lot of interest, and we've also had the Commission for Inclusion of Black Jews and Jews of Colour that we've been looking at, and the youth part of the Board of Deputies has played a huge role in that, and they've been very, very vocal, and I absolutely admire them for wanting a place, and I think they do need to also make sure that their views are engaged with and represented, which is why I want to have one of the trustee positions also for a youth. Some say, well, election will produce, as you said at the beginning, will produce everything. Well, it doesn't. There's been one youth trustee in living memory, which was Richard Verber. He did an amazing job, but one trustee who was a youth isn't enough. And we all want to make sure that the next generation has every opportunity to give their views and engage, and that we show that we have respect for those views and they're in the community. So there's a very, very active youth division, and we've got 12 deputies from UJS. So we do have an increasing young element, and I will ask for an impact study on the average age at the Board of Deputies this triennium, but I know it's come down from late 60s or 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a televised a meeting from 2019. I think Robert Jenrick was addressing that committee meeting at the time, and I looked around the room, and you'll forgive me for saying this, but you looked far younger than 55 that day, because the other people in the room looked far older than 95. So I think there is a lot of work yet to be done on that. Richard Verber is one of our own, so I wasn't specifically going to address Richard's situation, but Richard's obviously a talented young man, and he's gone on to do other things since. But how do we retain the engagement of talented youth people? They obviously, I mean, Richard's a rarity, in as much as he wanted to take a position of leadership, you know, and rose quite high within the organization. But one of the challenges that I see, and we all have these challenges, it's not just the Board of Deputies, it's echoed in every Jewish organization across the length and breadth of this country. We are particularly bad at speaking to people. I mean, we talk about youth, so you're broadly speaking, you know, 16 to 30. That's a great young youth group. But however, you want to move that on ever so slightly, and you look between 30 and say 45. There are a lot of people like yourself. I mean, let's take your history. You were a successful lawyer. You were a mother, and unfortunately, you had a health battle, and you had to press stop on the clock and reassess all of your options. And it was
because I still have to work on top of being the Board of Deputies president. I don't work as many hours, but I do have to work every day. I'd love to.
So can it be done? So can we assure the people of say my age, I don't know, 40-ish, that they can take positions on a board and they'll be supported in as much as they'll be able to have a voice, they'll be able to play a role, but they'll also be able to balance that with their careers?
What's very important is that the youth are not seen as token representation. That's why I'm also campaigning amongst our changes at the moment, as well as the regional trustee, to have a youth trustee, because that's the best way to make sure that the youth are encouraged to be part of the Board of Deputies. And I, of course, understand as a working mother, which I still am, my children are still at school. My elder daughter is coming up to doing her GCSEs. Well, she might not be doing them this
year.
but they are of school age. It is very difficult to be a working mother, president and trustee, and I'm trustee of a number of organisations. But because of those health problems that you talked about, I'm a cancer survivor. I said that I wanted to repay something to the community, which is why I'm doing this job as a volunteer. And I feel that that's something that's really, really important. Yes, I absolutely believe that young people can come to the table and be a trustee. And I want to make sure that one of those guaranteed trustee roles is for the youth of today, and that they have a chance to give their views, and that we have to engage, and that we then can have a proper youth strategy led by the youth, and that they're not viewed as token representation. They absolutely have the same place at the table. That's the way to engage the youth in the future.
And so I'm presuming the wider constitutional changes in terms of term limiting as well is something, I only speak from my own personal experience. I'm part of an organisation, a Jewish Housing Association, where we put in place a term limiting. You could only, I think, be a member of the board for 9 years consecutively, and then it was time to sort of churn and have fresh ideas coming in. I presume that's something that's very much going to be part of the organisation going forward.
In the future, it is. I'm a relatively new deputy. I joined in 2012. And I do think it's very important that fresh people coming in. And if you are a president in your second term, you also want to make sure that you've got successors. So it's very important that we have an expanded board. We need to see monitoring of the next generation of leaders, opportunities, working together. There's plenty of work. It never stops at the board. But I, of course, as a working mother, do understand that young people have got other priorities. And we can work around that for the youth trustee. I absolutely will support the youth trustee, and I'm actively campaigning to make sure that happens for the benefit of everyone. And I think you'll find that during lockdown, especially, we've done so much, and we're active, for example, even with our campaign for the Uyghurs. So much of what we do, we've got a motion next month on climate control. Lots of young people really want to be part of the Board of Deputies, and we've seen much more interaction since lockdown with young people. And one of the things that's so good about Zoom, Adam Sugar, thank you. I used to go to B'nai Akiva with Adam Sugar when we were both at Wanstead and Woodford Synagogue. He was always very kind to me. Thank you, Adam. Sorry. Yes, it's, you know, it's very, very important that we all come together, and lockdown has at least shown us that we can, as you said earlier on, use Zoom. So that's good for everyone because it cuts down on travel. We can all interact, and it's young people have got so much to say that we can all listen to. We can learn things from, because at the Board of Deputies, when we have debates, you can be sure that young people have really researched what they're going to say.
I saw that this morning. I saw that there was more than sort of more young representation, if you like, than I thought initially.
Yes, and older people may sometimes have a thing or two to learn, but what we're seeing here at the moment is there is this absolute drive for younger people to have a place at the table, and we don't want to prevent that. I actively want to have a youth trustee and a regional trustee, so that those two groups are absolutely represented, and that will be good for everyone.
In terms of diversity, certainly in your leadership, you are, I suppose, I wanted to say almost unique, but that is now a thing of the past. But you have you have quite a number of women on the in position of power, if you like, within the organisation. You mentioned Gillian, who is moving on. But she's always been quite politically active prior to the board as well. But you know, it's nice to see that, and I suppose that is. I don't know whether that was the result of affirmative action from the leadership down the line, but I understand that you were originally encouraged to step forward, I think, by your rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, into the role.
I was two people. It was my rabbi and also someone called Simon Myers, who is he's the finance director of the JNF. Yes, they both encouraged me through my synagogue to come forward, and I was told the organisation was full of old men. See what you can go and do at the Board of Deputies, and let us know.
So we hope to see it changing, and that younger voice, because look, they are the future, and my worry is if you're not encouraging and you're not getting those people in their prime, you then just get left over to deal with a lot of egos and unfinished business in later life.
I agree. I mean, being board president is a very tough job. I work six days a week. It's 5 or 6 hours a day of Board of Deputies work. And it really is very challenging, but very, 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 very rewarding. There is never a dull moment. But yes, I do want to engage. And the fact that I was elected must give some reason for hope that the younger generation are going to be engaged. I'm currently the youngest trustee. And as I said, I know I'm not in my first flush of youth, but I'm not elderly. I don't behave in an elderly manner. I've got kids still at school. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but we need to make sure there is that diversity on the board going future, which is why I want to make sure, and so do the trustees, that we have a youth trustee.
Okay, well, that is to be applauded, and it's a breath of fresh air. Deborah Fraser has asked a question. I believe actually this is Harris, disguised as Deborah, but here you go. Do you believe that many people, especially in the provinces, could describe with clarity what the board stands for and what its values are? I believe that there is a major PR campaign required to get people to understand and buy into your proposition. Now, the reason that I know this is Harris is one of our trustees, but he's also one of our previous presidents. And during his time, there were discussions about getting the Board of Deputies in to speak to the congregation, to inform them what it is that they stand for and what they do. And the background to that, and I mean this with no disrespect, is that when we have our AGMs and when we have our council meeting, and when Robert gives his report on what goes on at the Board of Deputies, when we're asked to renew our membership to the Board of Deputies, we always have the same discussion. Is it worthwhile? Do we get anything from this? Does it mean anything to us? up here in the north. And I know we touched on it briefly. Harris is saying that you need a bit of you need to go on the road with a PR campaign. And I suppose, given, if Corona wasn't here, you'd be able to do that. But
I was indeed on the road, and I've spoken at most shuls in Manchester, and I've always wanted to speak in your shul. So I'm thrilled that I've now got the opportunity, and I'll be delighted to come in person. Look, if the Board of Deputies wasn't here, people would know about it. We've been here since 1760, and however people criticise the Board of Deputies, we're the envy of many faith communities around the world, because we are a very organised community. We had to face the awful situation with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, and we were very proud to stand up as a community to defend ourselves and fight against anti-Semitism from a man that brought anti-Semitism from the fringes of society right into the heart of the Labour Party. If the Board of Deputies wasn't here every day fighting our position, I think people would realise that. But do I think the message needs to keep being reminded, even what we do in relation to coroners' issues, heritage, community work? Yes, I agree with you. We need to make sure that we do get the message out. And one of the tasks of the regional trustee is going to be to make sure that more of the trustees are on the road. I do think it's very important. I used to travel before lockdown on many Shabbats around the country, and I do think that's very important. And of course, we've got Zoom, and I would like, however, to meet your members in person. But I hope Robert has given a very good account of all the things that the
In fairness to Robert, he's always thought that that it has a value, and I think the view that we end up taking every time is that we'd rather be a part of the conversation than stand on the outside looking in, saying, well, we're not a part of this, but we don't agree with what's going on in that room over there. The only way to get our voice heard is to get our deputy up there, and unlucky for you, we picked a deputy that's got a hell of a voice, and he's not afraid to let it be heard. So
deputy is afraid to be heard, and Robert can certainly look after himself and can be heard. But all of the deputies are very, very opinionated, but it is very good to have deputies. It'd be nice if you have more than one deputy, and that's very good that we can be there, we can talk about it. We appreciate all the work that Robert has done, and you're right, it's better to be in the conversation. And I think you'll find that once we've got the regional trustee, that trustee will hopefully play a bigger part in drawing it together. But there's a lot of deputies that are from the regions, and they do come together and they do have a regional strategy. And the chair is Paul Edlin from the Glasgow Representative Council, and they've fought very hard. And another way that we have helped, and they've fought for years for this, and this has never happened before. We have now employed a regional employee based in Manchester called Sarah Radovan, and she's amazing. That's evidence of our commitment. No one's ever had a regional employee before, so we're doing everything possible to support the regions, including having a member of staff there to demonstrate that we really do want to make sure that we are representative and that we're there to help on a daily basis with the issues that arise, which is why Sarah is there, and she's doing a fantastic job.
She is doing a fantastic job. I can definitely second that. So just to go back to that issue, because I think Sarah and I spoke earlier this week, and we went over the sort of things that we may be discussing. And one of those is Jeremy Corbyn, and it's I suppose you were thrown a bit of a curveball in your first term as president, with having to deal with that. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think it's clear that both the Jewish Leadership Council and the Board of Deputies and the CST, they all came together to campaign against anti-Semitism. But how would you answer those critics that looked at the Board of Deputies' stance on Corbyn personally, and I think there were calls to cut off ties or communications with his leadership at some point, which were rejected. So how would you answer those critics that said not enough was done early enough in the process?
I would answer those critics. I'm not. I just want to say that I'm not a member of the Labour Party, just in case anybody's wondering. We've worked day in, day out. I'm sorry to answer those critics. To try to resolve the situation as it is now, I just want to say that Keir Starmer's made a very good start. He's given his apologies. We've got a Labour action plan, but we're not out of the woods yet. We have to make sure that action plan is implemented, and it's actions, not words, that are important. Jeremy Corbyn, as far as I'm concerned, was fought daily in relation to so many issues relating to anti-Semitism that you can't imagine what a difficult time that was. We had to live, we had to breathe it. We absolutely fought against him and his anti-Semitism, and we did do a very good job with our fellow communal organisations, the Jewish Leadership Council. I am a trustee of the Jewish Leadership Council, and also the CST. We all came together and we all worked extremely hard, and the community, I think, should have been very pleased with the communal organisations that really stood together and to fight this unprecedented, awful situation that we were faced with. It was a very, very real fear. And we're not out of, as I say, we're not yet out of the woods. And I went on Question Time as well, and I told the Nation and the Labour Party exactly how the community felt, how awful it was. The Labour Party faced such a day of shame. They'd been found guilty of unlawful acts of victimisation and harassment by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. They are under no illusion how we felt, but we did fight, and never before have I seen the Jewish community go to the streets. When we went for the Enough is Enough demonstration in March 2018, that was unprecedented, and all the communal organisations worked together to actually face and deal with that challenge. And if the Board of Deputies wasn't here, I think we would be in a far worse position. We've certainly had to deal with one of the worst situations that the Jewish community have faced in this country ever.
Without wishing to tap into anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, how much power does an organisation like the Board of Deputies have? Maybe power is the wrong word. How much influence do we have in terms of UK politics and policies and having the ear of the major parties?
I think we've got an absolutely huge influence. In the US, Al Jumaina's named me as one of the 100 most influential Jews in the world. We've got a huge media reach. I said before, one of our podcasts with the Israeli ambassador reached 15,000 people. We've got a huge influence. We know how to advocate for the Jewish community, and you'll see even this morning there was a reference to the Board of Deputies on the Andrew Marr programme. I've been numerous times speaking on the Today programme, all of the news programmes, Israeli television, as I said, Question Time, Newsnight. We get our voice heard. We are loud and we are proud. We are here to represent the community. We will stand tall, and I think that they do listen, and they had to listen, because we're not quiet, as you have said earlier on. I don't think we can anyone in the Jewish community.
We won't get accused of being shy, that's for sure.
No way.
In terms of the media and your relationship with the media, there was accusation, a few years ago, that the BBC, for instance, had extreme bias one way or t'other. Do you feel that's as bad today as it was? I mean, we're living in very strange political times, especially when you glance across the water and see what's going over there, and how the media, well, it doesn't know where it is. It's being accused of making up fake news by those that don't agree with its views. are we here in England, are we falling victim to the same sort of political and media bias that we used to experience, or has it got better?
No, I think there is still a lot of bias, particularly how Israel is represented. Without going into specifics, it doesn't go away. We have a quarterly meeting with the BBC, so I will take up things that we weren't happy with. We regularly are writing, I'm afraid, to the BBC, so it doesn't put Israel in a good light. In fact, I think there are so many instances where Israel is not fairly represented, and we do have to make sure that is taken up. We can't keep our foot off the pedal, but we also have been fighting against the social media giants who have been very irresponsible, because online, I just want to mention, is the new front line against hatred, and we have to deal with anti-Semitism online, and it's not just left-wing anti-Semitism, it's also from the right-wing anti-Semitism as well. We mustn't forget that. So that is a very important issue that you've raised. And do I believe it will be changed? No, I think the BBC consistently is showing bias against Israel.
And do you think it's perhaps because we seem to be held to a higher moral standard than the rest of the world, because that's one of the things that we perpetuate it in many ways, because we tell people that we act in such a way that we hope we can be held to a higher moral standard.
I don't know why it is. I just know that it happens. I don't like it when it happens. It causes huge concern. I get lots of members of the public writing in straight away, lots of deputies. We just have to keep making sure. And there's a comment that's just gone up: Facebook is extremely biased. I have to say, in relation to Facebook, not that long ago, someone did a post where they wanted to bomb the Board of Deputies and put bullets in us, and Facebook wouldn't take it down because they said it didn't breach their community standards. So we've had a lot of it's been very difficult. We've had to really advocate hugely with the social media giants to take responsibility. Particularly, I'm very pleased to say, in relation to Holocaust denial, there is at least some success there with Facebook. But this is also another issue with social media in relation to fighting hatred.
I'm conscious of your time, and I think your virtual taxi is waiting for you. But before we do, in the last minute, perhaps we can cover something else that you've been quite vocal about recently, and that is the campaign surrounding, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Uyghurs and their plight, particularly in China. Why is it that this has resonated so strongly with the Board of Deputies? Why is it that this is something that the Board of Deputies has sought to really sort of push forward more than almost any other community?
Well, as Jews, we've got a long history of being refugees and the horrors of the Holocaust. And to see and to hear about people being rounded up because they're Uyghurs, put on trucks, taken to labour camps, forcibly sterilised, their hair cut off, it's absolutely chilling for the Jewish community because of our own experiences and the Holocaust. And we know that we need to do the right thing, and we need to speak up. Nobody spoke up for the Jews, did they? And look at the horrors of the Holocaust. So we are speaking up, and I wrote to the Chinese ambassador last February, and I think that it's been very well received that the Jewish community is speaking up. And I can say that there is a huge amount of unity within the Board of Deputies, that we are speaking up about the treatment of the Uyghurs, and we've got that moral duty to do so. And as I say, I haven't seen the Andrew Marr programme this morning, but there was a reference to the letter that I have written to the Prime Minister on that. And I think that's absolutely the right thing, that we just have to do it. We can't just ignore this.
I presume therefore that the board has an overarching responsibility to do this with any community across the world that is faced by genocide or annihilation in any way, or victimization?
We can't take on every single cause in the world. I wish we could, but this is something that is so extreme and so unimaginable, that we just have to speak up. We do speak up wherever we can, and we have to put our time and resources accordingly. But we do speak out against injustice, and so many people have supported us when we have spoken out about anti-Semitism, for example, and they can also see that we are supporting, other minority communities. We work together with other minority communities, and we call out terrible things, for example, the Uyghurs, and we also get respect from other non-Jews because they can see who we are and our values.
Okay, David's just thrown in another comment here. This is going back to our discussion on Facebook. He says that the head of Facebook in the US and Europe are both Jewish. Why is it like this?
Well, David, I can certainly say that in the US, why are they like it? I don't know him personally, but they believe in the US that freedom of expression means that you can say what you like. In the UK, freedom of expression does not extend to hatred, but that's also not understood by a lot of people. But even the head of Facebook heard the demands, and Holocaust denial is no longer permitted on Facebook. But that is the argument that's used. Freedom of speech is also on campus, which is also just as unacceptable. I can't give you a reason otherwise. I can't say why, but it's clearly not right. And even if people are Jewish, that's going to be irrelevant. They have got a responsibility because they are social media giants, and we can see the hatred that there is online against Jews and others, and we will certainly be calling it out, whoever they are.
Oh, Marie, you there? Okay, I think you're back with us. But we could probably see that the tide is ever so slightly changing in that respect, with most recent news of Twitter banning President Trump from voicing perhaps very right-wing opinion and stirring up hatred. That's an unprecedented step. That sort of censorship was never in place before. So perhaps the US's stance on freedom of speech is starting to become a little bit more measured.
Well, no president has ever encouraged the mob to the Capitol before. And of course, you're right. Very good point to make, that once Twitter has taken responsibility, and the president from Twitter, that then implies that they're going to take responsibility for other things. So let's hope they do.
Excellent. Marie, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for visiting us up north. Don't leave us lonely. Come back again.
I will not. I'm delighted. I'll come in person. You've been great.
We'd love to see you in person once this is all over. And we are suitably encouraged that you're well on the road to agreeing those constitutional reforms, which hopefully will see everybody satisfied eventually, and that fair compromise will be reached.
Compromise is good, and that's what the Jewish community is good at, and I think that's very important. And I've really enjoyed the interview with you, David. Great questions from the audience as well, and I want to thank you all for listening to me tonight. Thank you. I'm privileged to be able to speak.
Absolutely, our pleasure. You're very welcome. Good evening, everybody. Have a good week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Stay tuned. We've started with the president of the Board of Deputies. We're slowly working our way up to Chief Rabbi at the end of the month. So we're well on our way. Thank you very much. Have a good week, everybody. Goodbye.